How does someone with average intelligence and perfectly mediocre morals command the absolute devotion of thousands of people? In 19th century England, there was a proven formula: become an evangelical preacher. But before she wrote Middlemarch, a young editor and translator named Marianne Evans, better known to the world as George Eliot, decided to look past the theatrical sermons. She wanted to evaluate the actual printed substance of his teachings, to see what all this popularity was built on. Her resulting essay forces a critical question. When a religious leader reaches this level of cultural saturation, we have to ask if their work actually elevates society or if it acts as a dangerous grift that degrades public morality. Reading through 9 volumes of Cumming's work, Eliot noticed a glaring absence. There was no trace of genuine spiritual joy, no peace, and no real empathy for the lost or erring. Instead, she found a mind entirely closed to honest inquiry. Eliot diagnosed him with unscrupulosity of statement. Because Cumming believed his dogmas were the absolute requirement for salvation, he felt perfectly justified in using argumentative white lies to protect his worldview. This meant he regularly published absolute falsehoods about historical figures if it helped him score cheap points against non-believers. To terrify his readers, Cumming fabricated a story about the poet Lord Byron, claiming that on his deathbed, the so-called infidel was consumed by horror and despair, a total invention that completely ignored Byron's actual quiet passing. He applied this same intellectual dishonesty to science. When faced with new geological discoveries about the age of the Earth, Cumming performed absurd mental gymnastics to claim that the Book of Genesis was a perfectly accurate scientific text, twisting the obvious meaning of Scripture to dodge the facts of geology. For a dogmatic demagogue, empirical facts and historical truths are entirely disposable. The only metric of success is the survival and enforcement of the rigid belief system itself, no matter how many truths have to be bent to uphold it. Yet Eliot argued that Cumming's intellectual failures were mild compared to his moral failures. While his religion technically preached love, Eliot saw it as a charter to hatred. Cumming obsessed over the literal eternal damnation of anyone outside his specific circle of believers, conditioning his audience to view their neighbors not as fellow humans, but as agents of hell destined for torture. This chart visualizes the climax of Eliot's critique. In Cumming's framework, human action branches based on a single strict requirement. A deed can only be considered good if it is performed explicitly and exclusively to serve the glory of God. Eliot presents a devastating hypothetical. Imagine a woman braving a violent storm in a rowboat to rescue a drowning man. If she does this out of natural human compassion, Cumming's logic dictates that her action is inherently evil because her motive was human sympathy rather than theological duty. This doctrine does not elevate human morality. It actively demands the suppression and destruction of our natural empathy, replacing our innate desire to help each other with a cold, mechanical checklist. Eliot's ultimate verdict on Dr. Cumming is absolute. His system hollows out the living, breathing love of humanity, replacing it with an artificial, fear-driven anxiety about praising a tyrant God. In contrast, Eliot lays out a profound counter-philosophy of secular humanism. She argues that true morality isn't handed down through rigid dogma. It is rooted in the honest, fearless pursuit of truth and deep, genuine interpersonal connection. She believed any valid moral system must multiply our love for our fellow humans. It should take the strength of human sympathy and expand it, rather than mandating hatred for those who fall outside the walls of the church. By methodically stripping away Cumming's layers of self-deception, Eliot was refining a technique she called the analysis of motives. She was learning to map the secret and delicate springs of human action, the very skill that would later allow her to construct the deep, psychologically rich characters of Middlemarch and Daniel Deronda from the inside out. Eliot's takedown of Dr. Cumming leaves us with a sharp defense of secular humanism. It reminds us that any belief system is only as good as the empathy it encourages, and that protecting a dogma is never worth the cost of our natural human connection.